Welcome, everybody, to the True Crime Report with Jim Rathmann. I'm your host, Jim Rathmann. I have an amazing guest here today. We've been waiting for this for 6 years. I'm sitting here right now with Melanie Curtin. This will be the first interview she's ever done since all this took place back in the early part of 2020. Melanie, I love that you're sitting here. You're a free woman. Praise the Lord for that. And welcome here, and I look forward to talking with you today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a long time coming. Yeah. 6 years to be exact.
6 long years. I couldn't imagine. But I know publicly there are thousands upon thousands of people that are waiting to hear your side of everything, from what happened going back to 2020 all the way up to the most recent trial where you were unanimously found not guilty. So if you're ready to get started with that, I don't think we should keep people waiting any longer. What do you think?
I guess it's time.
All right.
I'm free.
Perfect. Yes, you are. So look, 2019, I know you're not even living in Louisiana. You hear word of Denny and Cynthia Perkins being arrested on the news. Where were you? When you heard about it for the very first time?
I was living and working in North and South Carolina at the time. I had family that reached out and told me the news, and my first thought was, well, I hate that. It's very surprising. But I just moved on and was living life. I didn't really give it much thought other than, you don't really know who you think you know, and I didn't feel affected by it. I had moved on with life. I was in another state working.
Right. And then, so Denny Perkins, Cynthia Perkins, they're arrested. Attorney General's office in Louisiana starts doing their investigation, and then at some point, you either got a call or something happened where they let you know that they wanted to speak with you.
Yes. I had someone come to my house in Louisiana, knocked on the door, left a business card, and then I think within an hour or two later, the same person came back. And I could tell in my doorbell camera because I wasn't in town. And as soon as I got there, got the card, I made a phone call and said, what is this about? Why are you reaching out? All that I was told is, we're doing an investigation and wanted to come in and ask you a few questions. And I said, okay, no problem. At the time, I had my boys with me, and I was working a lot. So I said, let me see if I can work it in my schedule. Can you give me any information? How long will it take? And he said, no, we can't really cover any of that. We just need to get you in the office whenever you can work it out. So I tentatively set something maybe within a day or two, and a chain of events with my ex-husband and the boy's father. I found that he met with them, and it was not a safe situation. And I found out abruptly that when he met with them, they must have indicated something about an arrest. I was unclear. There was a situation that occurred with both of the boys at a doctor's office. He kept saying, arrest her. He was not in the right frame of mind.
Right.
Under the influence at that time. So I called the investigator and said, I have some questions. It seems you've reached out to my ex-husband and something's not adding up. Can you please give me some information, a little bit more, so I'll know? And I was trying to get one of my boys back because he had taken off with them. And he said, no, I can't tell you anything, but just reach out to me and let me know if you're going to make it. The next day, I was advised to get an attorney, unsure of what was going on, and it raised question, why would my ex-husband know something or cause this problem with me going to question, what does he know that I don't know?
Right.
And that's when I learned he had met with the investigator previously.
So to kind of set the stage for everybody, you were working in North and South Carolina. You came back to Louisiana, usually to see your boys, spend time with them. So you were kind of going back and forth. your ex-husband was connected with law enforcement, which is probably the reasons why they talked to him. I don't believe, was he with law enforcement when they made contact with him?
Not at the time.
Okay.
They told me, the investigator, that they were wanting to verify my address when it was very clear that was my address.
Right.
I had permits, utility bills. You know, it's really easy to verify that someone lives
Right.
at a specific address.
So that next day, you're advised you need to contact an attorney. And the attorney I believe you contacted was your divorce attorney that you knew at the time, right?
Correct. He said, this is really close and this is a really big case in this area. I would rather not touch this. I need to remove myself, but I'll refer you to an attorney. So that's when I was referred to John McClendon.
Okay. So John McClendon, at that point, you retain him as your, well, maybe not retained him just yet, right? He gets the initial of what's going on, and then an arrangement is made.
Correct.
Okay. So
That would have been maybe a Thursday, Friday. I reached out to him and he said, I would be very glad to speak with you, to meet with you, get something set up. He said, let me reach out to the Attorney General's office, give me the man's information. We're going to contact him. He said, however, next week I'm going to be out of town. I said, well, that's fine because I'm already scheduled to go out of town as well. Right. I'm going on a cruise. And he said, oh, well, don't worry about it. Let me call and see if they'll give me some insight, give me some information. And he called back and said, they're not really letting me know what's going on. So they scheduled for the following week for us to come in and speak with them. I think it would have been the following Monday.
Okay.
So he said, you go do your thing, go live your life. And he said, they won't give us information, but we have an appointment, so we're all good. He said, I'm going out of town. We'll meet back over the weekend when you return, and we'll go see them on Monday. And everything seemed to be fine. I got on the cruise ship, didn't know anything was going on. That Friday evening, I was on the cruise, and my attorney called. He left me a message, and we had some text communication. He said, we're all good to go. Look forward to seeing you on Monday. We've got everything wrapped up and confirmed.
So just for everybody to understand, before she got on that cruise ship, that was in March, right? March of 2020 or late February?
January 27th, I believe,
okay.
Of 2020.
So late January of 2020, her attorney now is John McClendon. John McClendon reaches out to the Attorney General's office. The AG's office then schedules an appointment with her. So it would have been a little over a week away, but that appointment was confirmed for Monday. So she then takes off on your cruise, right? So
it was left on Monday out of New Orleans and returned on Saturday, February 1st of 2020.
Okay, so February 1st of 2020. Walk me through what happened when you ported back in New Orleans.
It was somewhere between 5 or 6 a.m., I believe. There was a loud knock at the door, banging, almost as though we were being evacuated. It kind of startled us. Abruptly, there were several people rushed into the room. These women grabbed me, brought me out of the bed, told me to get dressed. They would not leave me alone. They wouldn't even let me brush my teeth, use the bathroom. I couldn't do anything.
And these were agents with the AG's office? There
were about a dozen law enforcement with different agency uniforms standing outside the door.
Okay.
I was in instant shock and didn't know what to do. They just said, get dressed, you're coming with us. They cuffed me immediately and I said, I need to pack my belongings. What am I supposed to do? They said, nope, they'll have to be packed at another time. You're coming with us. No explanation.
No explanation at all. 5 o'clock in the morning. They walk you out and they take you, I'm assuming there's a jail or there's some sort of processing center within the cruise ship?
It was somewhere off the port. It is a little furry because I was in such shock and scared. I didn't know what was happening or why. There were a lot of concrete walls and rooms. I think it was off the port somewhere within walking distance. And they sat me in a room with the investigator who had called me. He introduced himself and he said, I think you know why we're here. And I said, I don't understand why we're here because I have a meeting scheduled with my attorneys on Monday. We were already coming in to speak to you. So this is an abrupt way to get someone's attention. I don't understand.
Right. So at that point, they walk you to wherever this little, I don't know, processing center, maybe it's a little substation, whatever the case might be. The agent that you met with, what do you remember who that agent was?
Gene Guidry.
Gene Guidry. Okay, so that's the first time you see Gene Guidry. Were there media?
There were people with cameras. There was a specific officer. He referred himself as Brian with LBI. And as they're walking me from one room to the other, I think they did 3 different searches. They found me. I was in my pajamas. It's not like I could have had anything on me. It seemed a little excessive and very abrasive. And someone stuck their foot out, tripped me, kind of kicked at me. And he said, smile, very arrogantly. And I looked up and looked back down. I said, I'm not taking pictures. I don't know what I'm here for, as I'm cuffed and shackled. And they said, oh, no, he's fine. He's with us. This isn't going anywhere. It's just for our purposes. That was the picture that was blasted on the news media immediately.
Wow. So you still haven't been told what's going on. They have you in this room. Essentially, you get tripped or kicked or however it was. Tells you it's with LBI. Mm-hmm. I don't even know who the hell that is. And then takes your picture, but tells you this is just for their purposes, but yet it gets blasted everywhere.
All over the media. Correct.
Wow.
Then from there, they took me to Orleans Parish. And I said, where am I going and why? I was scared. Whose possession am I in? What are they going to do to me and why if I don't understand what is happening? They take me to Orleans jail, and they said, we're going to book you as a fugitive. My first thought is, fugitives are people on the run. I haven't run away from anything. I don't understand why. And they said, well, your charges aren't in this parish. They're in Livingston Parish. And I said, what charges? They're like, we'll see. You'll go over it. They'll go over it with you when you get booked in. And I said, booked in for what? They would not give me an answer. At that point, as I'm waiting in Orleans, that same guy, Brian, with the LBI, he said, you mean to tell me you didn't know that you were about to be arrested? It's been all over the media. Everybody's been talking about this. How can you tell me? You're lying to me. You knew exactly what was happening. And I said, well, I clearly just got off of a cruise, and I'm not on social media, nor have I been for many years. I have lived a private life, and I've been busy working and being a mom to my kids.
Right. So this Brian from LBI is showing up multiple times now, besides just taking your photo. But I want to set the stage for everybody because and correct me if I'm wrong, but what Melanie is referring to when talking about you had no idea that you were going to be getting arrested was referring to the fact that, as put out, and what Brian is clearly making notable there, is that she was the third person involved with Denny and Cynthia Perkins. That's what was in the media at that time. So that would mean that everyone is thinking that Melanie Curtin is now tied in with the children. Am I right on that?
Correct.
So there it is, this Brian, which I don't even know if that's really his name, right? With an agency. I don't even know who the hell LBI is, but is now telling you that you had no idea that you were tied into this in some sort of way with all the media, which is clearly the third person involved with Denny and Cynthia Perkins, because that was out for a few weeks from what I remember, which is obviously very researchable as well. And so they book you. When do they tell you of your charges?
It wasn't even there in Orleans Parish. They just said, we're booking you as a fugitive. And then they're going to transport you to the parish where the charges are. I said, well, where's that? And they said, Livingston. And in my mind, I'm thinking, how do I have charges in Livingston Parish? What is it for? And they said, you'll know whenever you get there. So they put me in the vehicle, handcuffed, drive me from New Orleans to Livingston Parish, bring me into that facility. And the news was out of outside the jail, recording me as I went through. Even one of the officers that was in the back seat with me, he said, sorry, we've got to do this. And I go in the jail, and they get together paperwork. They put me in a holding cell and brought me out to sign.
So real quick, I want to rewind this because real fast. Orleans Parish booking you as a fugitive is, I will say, for those listening, isn't doing anything out of the ordinary. We do that all the time with when we had somebody out of a different parish or county or even a state, you book them as a fugitive. They don't know the details to everything. They're just booking you based off of the warrant. All the details would actually be with either the Attorney General's office or Livingston Parish. But what I want to highlight here real quick is when you say you pulled up to the jail and they're telling you, I'm sorry, we have to do this. What Melanie's talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, is when you get out is all the media being there. We refer to that as a perp walk. So they perp walked you for all the media to be able to see.
Yes.
They can take all the pictures and videos and put it all over their news channels and blast it everywhere. Right? Isn't that what you're referring to?
That's exactly what happened.
Okay.
Yes. They ended up filling out paperwork and asked me to sign. They said, these are the charges that you're being charged with. It doesn't mean you're guilty, but it's just acknowledging that you're aware these are the charges. And you'll hear from a judge maybe within the next 24 to 48 hours. This was on a Saturday. Judges don't have any communication with people over the weekend. And when I was unclear of what was going on, I had no family close by. I didn't know anyone's phone numbers. I kept asking for a phone call. And like most people, your phone numbers are in your phone and you don't have them memorized. But that's when she pointed and she told me the charges are first-degree aggravated rape and video voyeurism. And I shook my head no. I said, I'm not signing that. She said, it's not an option. You have to sign it acknowledging this is what we're booking you on these charges for. And you can fight these later on, but you have to sign this for now. And I was scared to do anything because I was so unsure of what was happening and why. It didn't make sense to me. It didn't add up what this was about.
Right. So you now know for the first time that your charge was first degree aggravated rape and video voyeurism. So you find out what your charges are. You don't really know the details behind it. I can't imagine what is running through your head at this point.
I was completely terrified of how does this happen and where did this come from? It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. And I was still in shock.
Yeah.
And I thought, how am I going to move forward from this? I felt like I really left the world. I thought I was in a bad dream. Maybe I'll wake up and the amount of stress that goes through your body, shivering, shaking, you can't think straight.
Right.
I just kept saying, I need a phone call, because going to jail is scary when you think you're a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen and you do everything you can to live right and do right. How did I end up in this place?
Right. So you get booked on your charges. When did they allow you to make that phone call, and who did you call?
I called Chris. And he was on his way back home. He was getting on a flight. He said, your car's in the parking garage. Your sister's going to come get your suitcase. It's in the trunk. I got everything packed up. And he had called my mom, I believe, and some of my sisters and let them know I'm headed back home. This is where she's at. And let me know what's going on or what I can do.
Right.
So at that point, he was flying back to South Carolina.
Okay. And Chris for everyone that doesn't know, Chris is Melanie's fiance. So I can't imagine what his thoughts must have been at that time. You guys were on a cruise ship, enjoying your cruise. Like, we got a little mini vacation going on here. What the hell happened? 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, banging on your door, dozen law enforcement officials inside your room, you're handcuffed. He had to have been confused as hell, just like you.
He kept asking him, what is going on? What is this about? And they wouldn't tell him. They're like, we're going to take her down to the station and book her if you want to go. And he said, well, I have a plane to catch. What would you do? You knew somebody for, I guess we knew each other for 2 years at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And he was thinking, I just want to get out of here. I don't know what's going on, but I don't want any part of this.
Right.
And his version is he gets on the plane and he's flying back and he's running through his mind, how could this possibly be? If this is the person I know, what in the world is happening? And what are they going to do to her? What's happening?
Right.
And at that point, he said, I have to see this through. I'm not going to leave her side. Knowing who she is,
right,
it would be wrong for me to just leave her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew who you were. He knew you weren't a criminal. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious to a lot of people, but he definitely knew you weren't a criminal. So you get booked, you make your phone call, you spend the weekend at Livingston Parish Jail. Monday comes. I'm assuming it was Monday. It was your arraignment. So you get to see the judge for the first time.
It was a phone call. Yes.
Okay.
It was the judge, I think it was Judge Johnson, and he retired shortly after that. He read the charges and he said, do you understand these? I said, no, I don't understand why I'm being charged with this. And he said, you don't necessarily have to understand them, but I have to read these charges to you, and you have to accept knowledge that this is being pressed against you, and you can fight this in court. He said, but you need to seek legal counsel. And I said, well, I thought I had legal counsel.
Right.
And they, the attorneys and my family were getting together trying to figure out what's going to happen from here. And the judge at that point set the bond. I believe it was $350,000.
$350,000, pretty high bond.
Yes.
It's a lot of money.
Now knowing there are people with murder charges that don't even come close to that.
It's insane to me.
Yes.
So $350,000 bond, you're pretty much restricted. Like, you can't go anywhere. You are being monitored 24/7, right? Then they put an ankle monitor on you, or how did that work?
It took about a week. It was 5 days. I bonded out February 5th of 2020. My family had to come together and pull all kinds of strings and financial means to try to make it happen, to try to bond me out till we could figure out what was going on. And it was so rough. The media had slandered me so badly, and I didn't know this, and my family did protect me from this. I had death threats, and I didn't know at the time they were protecting me. But my sister had to reach out. One of the bond conditions were that I couldn't leave the state. At first, they said I couldn't leave the state, but they knew the risk and the threats that were out there. I was very sheltered. I was in a holding cell.
Right.
They had to find someone who could put an ankle monitor on me, and they had asked them to come at night. They had to come bond me out at night when it was dark to try to stay away from the media and not have anyone out there to video or get any recordings of me bonding out. They first let us leave. It's the papers I signed said I could leave the state of Louisiana. We wanted to make sure. The next day, we found out that I could not leave the state of Louisiana, but it wasn't safe for me to be there.
Right.
We had an emergency court hearing to find out from the judge what he would allow, and he said I was not allowed to leave the state of Louisiana, that the death threats and comments that were made that were read off by my attorney, that's normal. People in the media are going to do that. You can't let that run your life. You can leave the parish, but you can't leave the state. With an ankle monitor on that I was ordered to pay $275 a month to be monitored because I was labeled such a high-profile criminal at this point, a flight risk.
And I remember when I came on this later, which we'll get into, those threats. I mean, there were numerous death threats against you. There were death threats against the bail bondsman, if I'm not mistaken. There were things done to your residence. I think where there's some windows or some things broken at the house.
There were wires cut, my utility wires. They stole my garbage cans, I guess to try to get information out of there. I don't know. Yeah.
You know, and then the threats, and then you have 2 children you're worried about at the same time. What did they experience?
At that point, the Attorney General's office had instructed their father, my ex-husband, to file a restraining order against me. He got full custody immediately. When I was in jail for those 5 days, the judge signed over full custody to their father and a restraining order. I was not able to call them, see them, speak to them. And sadly, my oldest son, his birthday was in March. There's Easter in April. There's my youngest son's birthday is in May, and Mother's Day. So my mind was thinking they have just probably experienced something very traumatic.
Right.
And I have no way to communicate with them or speak to them, nor could any of my family, according to the order. My mom, their grandmother, their aunts, no one could reach out to them or speak to them.
So to put this in perspective for everybody, because obviously Melanie was found not guilty and she's a free woman now, but we're setting the stage for what it is that she went through. To me, I can't, like the hearing all this, even though I've known this, but hearing it from your side for the first time, it's mind-blowing to me because, you know, Melanie paid her taxes. She went to work. She did all the things she's supposed to do. She's raising her kids. She has a family. She's doing all the right things. To all of a sudden find out the Attorney General's office wants to talk to you. It goes from, I'm wanting to talk to you. We have an attorney. We have a meeting on Monday. It's all set up to, we're going to snatch you up in the morning. We're going to perp walk you. We're not going to tell you anything. We're going to keep you in the dark. You're going to go through this process. You're going to get your arraignment. You're going to set for bail. You can't leave the state of Louisiana. You have numerous death threats. And then all of a sudden now you have a restraining order filed against you. You can't see the 2 kids that you gave birth to that is literally, and I've learned this over time, are your complete and utter world. I can't imagine what that must have been like for you, for your family, for your children. Like, that is a nightmare. And it's almost like, can someone just wake me up from this nightmare? What the hell is going on? And this is what was done to you, in my opinion, completely wrong and injustice. Like, I'll get into that later, but hearing this for the first time and hearing it from you, I mean, this is mind-blowing. It's terrifying.
The words we heard over and over again over the years were, wow, we've never heard of this before. This has never happened before. This is unbelievable. This is impossible. We don't know how you got to this point. And for years, I kept thinking, how do we fix it? How do you come back from something like this?
Right. Oh, man. So we're going to keep it going because we need to, right?
Okay.
So you missed holidays, birthdays, graduations, right? Aren't your kids around the age of graduation or somewhere around within this time frame?
Missed high school graduation, missed getting them their first vehicles. When this first happened, I didn't understand how could they come up with these charges. How could this be? They finally told my attorney, there's a video that we found with Melanie in it. He said, what were you doing on this day, and how can we find out what happened? I had nothing. I had no explanation. I had no understanding how this could happen. As I'm going through brainstorming with my family, my sister said, what were you doing on this day?
Well,
this is in 2020.
I don't remember what I did last week.
Exactly. They're saying, well, this happened in 2014. And I thought, I have no idea what I was doing. I looked back in my phones, And what's interesting is I was never investigated. They had asked me to come in and ask questions. The next thing I know, I'm arrested. And they never said, we're going to search your house, give us all of your devices, give us your cell phone, any communication, any correspondence, emails. No, they did not investigate me at all. How does that happen?
And as far as they know, and at this point, because this is the part that aggravates me the most, and yes, I'm emotionally attached to this case because of how many years we spent working this to try to read things and to figure things out. But what blows my mind is that Denny was very meticulous, and he had a file for each one of the females. Those were essentially victims, right? There was a file on Melanie. So at this point, they know enough to say you're a defendant, but they haven't even ruled out the fact, are you even a victim? Like, don't you think that would make sense to have asked you those questions to figure out, are you a victim like the rest of the women, right? But instead, you just became a defendant. It's almost as if they went into this with just complete blinders on, and it was like, I need to throw something at the wall to see what sticks, because we need to use this later on to try to get Denny and Cynthia. That's about the only damn thing that can make sense.
Yes. It seems as though now looking back, how things unraveled, that's exactly what happened.
I mean, we're going to get into those details, but I've been involved with so many investigations in my day. This one, honestly, I haven't seen anything like this. I haven't seen, to be quite honest and frank, such a shitty job. And I mean, this is just terrible from the start. But let's continue on. So you find out a video from 2014. You're racking your brain. It's pretty – I honest to God couldn't tell you what I did last week. Like if you say, what did you do on Monday last week? I have no clue.
Didn't know.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're trying to rack your brain to go back 5 years, 6 years. I mean, that is a long time. So now they tell you it's, it's from 2014. You're asking your family. You're looking through your cell phones. You're doing everything. When did you end up figuring it out?
My sister Googled any major events on November 8th of 2014. She said that was when LSU and Alabama played. Where did you go to watch the game? What events can you remember from that? Because we all know LSU-Alabama games are huge.
Yeah.
And if we weren't watching it at the house, we would go somewhere and watch it. And I said, I'm not really sure, but I know I got sick one year. We were at someone's house, and I thought it was something that I ate. I got sick, and that night I went to the ER. And she said, when was it? And I said, I have no idea. I don't even know how to figure out when it was. She said, well, if you went to the ER, why don't you request your medical records? Mm-hmm. That's what I did. I filled it out. It took a week or two to get them back. I opened the mail and saw my medical records, and it was the exact same date.
Wow.
And I thought, this is very crazy, and it's connecting dots I never knew existed or that it needed to be connected. My first thought was, I'm calling my attorney. This would answer all the questions that everyone has. Right. And it would have been, the arrest was in February. This would have been probably April. This was when COVID, was widespread everywhere. A lot of places were shut down. Mm-hmm. But I kept asking my attorney, can we please go talk to them? Can I please talk to the investigators? Like, they have the wrong person. I don't understand why this is happening. I want to talk to my kids. I'm missing all these special events. And when I called him and told him, he said, you've got to be kidding me. He said, this is great.
Right. It's almost like this changes everything. It's the game changer.
Yes. The investigators at the AG's office finally said, agreed to a meeting, but it wasn't until May 22nd of 2020.
Okay.
So from February to May, I've missed both of my children's birthdays, missed Mother's Day, no communication, could not speak with them. I was on the family court side fighting at that point to file court filings to try to get visitation back to see my children. And they only allowed supervised visitation with my children. Because they said, based off of these charges, and it's been several months since you've seen your children, you have to have supervised visitation. It was ridiculous.
It just keeps getting worse.
It was piling up. Each month it was something more unbelievable that would happen. So they agreed to a meeting May 22nd of 2020. That was also the next day I was able to have the first supervised visit with my boys. I made both of them a birthday cake, each one they liked. And it was so hard to have a stranger sit in the room and watch me interact or be around my boys, knowing that they had been exposed and had this persona of their mother exploited all over. And they knew me. I'm their mom.
Right.
And I'm sure they were confused.
You raised them.
They knew their mom. And I know that their views of things were probably tainted because they were hearing so much and had so many questions. At the time, they were 13 and 15. Those are very crucial ages for boys, teenage boys. And the counselor said, don't speak of anything that you're going through. Don't speak of anything about the case. Just have time with them, which sounds great.
So you can't even bring them peace.
I can't even explain how I'm doing. I had to live in a place during this time frame. I had to go live out of the area because it wasn't safe for me to be in the Baton Rouge, Livingston Parish area because of how horrible the media had painted a picture of me.
Gosh. So you have your visitation with your boys. Tell me about that meeting that you had, though. The meeting that was established with John McClendon, your attorney, yourself.
Yes.
And who else was present?
My attorney, John McClendon, Brant Mayer was also there. They were my attorneys together.
Okay.
Gene Guidry, the investigator, was there, and Matthew Derbies.
Matthew Derbies was the original prosecutor, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
He was the one the meeting was originally scheduled with between John McClendon, my attorney, and Matthew Derbies. He was also, when they made the arrest and John reached out to him, he said, "What in the world?" He said, "Got your girl. Sorry, man, I couldn't tell you." Those were his words.
That was Matt Derbies' words?
Matt Derbies sent that to my attorney. And that's why they went so public with it, I guess. It was hurtful to think, who did they think they got? What was this about? But
seems very political to me. Like they had a plan in place.
There was an agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And we met on May 22nd of 2020, and they recorded this interview, and they were asking questions. I also asked questions because I was still shocked and still didn't understand. This happened in February. Why are we just now getting to meet? And why is no one speaking about this? Why are you not giving us more information? And we went specifically so that we could show them these medical records. This would be clearance. This would probably explain something wasn't right. And it would solve a lot of questions and problems. And through the interview, they asked a lot of questions. I was more than eager to speak because I thought, these people don't know who I am.
Right.
Why can't I just share a little bit about me or what my life experiences were? And they asked to pause the interview. And when it was officially off the record, my attorney said, "We have some information, some evidence we need to show you." Matthew Derbies said, "You know that we've overcharged you on this and you'll never do the amount of time based off of these charges. But if we turn this recording back on and we find that you're lying to us, you're done. Do you understand me? You're toast." And I looked at my attorney and I said, "We might need to show him what we have." He walked to the end of the table, showed Matthew Derbies these records. He's thumbing through it like this. And he said, "You've got to be kidding me. Where did you find this?" He said, "Well, she requested her medical records." He explained to him she went to a football game. She started to not feel well, and she thought it was something she ate. So she drove herself to the emergency room. Her husband and her kids were with her, and they gave her some medication. He said, "Well, there's no drug records in her. They drew her blood, but they didn't see if anything was in her system." He said, "Well, she didn't do drugs." And she answered the question, "No." So I assumed they didn't figure it was necessary. There were some female issues that were reported on there. And I never even thought that those things would tie together.
Right.
And as he's flipping through these papers so arrogantly, he tossed them and said, "Must be her lucky day. But it's not up to me. It's up to the 7th floor." And I didn't know who was on the 7th floor, but I found out at the time the Attorney General in 2020 was Jeff Landry. So he said, "I'm going to have to take this to the higher-ups." They asked me to leave the room. They had a few words, and the interview was done at that point. He said, "We'll have to come back and finish another day."
So I want to make sure everybody understands, too, that when you went to the ER, you went to the emergency room the morning of November 8th, or was it the evening of November 8th?
The evening of.
Evening of November 8th, right. So you go to the ER, and, I have some medical background, too, so I can at least explain to this a little bit, but they're going to obviously hear your signs and symptoms. The signs and symptoms you were presenting could have been, it could have been a lot of things, right? But if you thought you ate something, they're looking more for food poisoning, E. coli, various things that would show in your blood system that you have food poisoning. They're not necessarily looking for GHB or any other sedatives that could have put you to sleep or knocked you out or caused you to have these types of symptoms. So they probably just ran a complete metabolic panel or a complete blood count. They want to make sure your white blood cells, your red blood cells are running like they're supposed to. You're there with your husband. You're there with your kids. So why would they suspect you to be on drugs or to have been drugged? That's not – so it – I understand what you're saying, but at that time, looking through that, right? That's the reasons why they would have ran those panels. If you went in there and said, "Look, something happened last night. I remember absolutely nothing," right? But again, that you were presenting what you knew, and they were checking for based on signs and symptoms.
Yes, I had symptoms. It was shortness of breath, heavy, like I felt like an elephant was on my chest. I would get hot and cold sweats and cramps. My head was killing me.
Right.
Vision would get a little blurry here and there. It almost felt like a fever or cold was coming on, but then I couldn't breathe. And that's why I thought it was an allergic reaction.
Right.
And during the football game, when it was in overtime, I took Benadryl. And, the friend there, she said, "Here, take some Benadryl and see if that helps." At that point,
antihistamine, so why not?
I had liquid Benadryl. I had a good bit of it, and it was not touching the symptoms.
And people can look this up, but some of the signs and symptoms of somebody that's been given GHB or scoops or things like that is shortness of breath, tightness in the chest, all the signs and symptoms you were actually feeling. You just didn't know that's what it was at that point, right? But those were, I can understand why you would have taken Benadryl. I can understand why you would have went to the ER if it didn't work, because your signs and symptoms were linked to something that you didn't know about. But you also didn't know, well, hell, in 5 years from now, I'm going to need these medical records. Like, who thinks like that?
Exactly. Yeah.
It should have been a pretty good clue for the Attorney General's office. And I can't speak for Matt Derby's. I don't know Matt Derby's. So, this was the meeting that you had with your attorney and Gene Guidry. So, but that's interesting news for sure.
We thought it was an easy fix, an easy solution. It was a huge misunderstanding is all I thought.
And I would have thought the same thing.
Yes.
So what ended up happening? So the meeting stopped. You guys go about. What was the next steps?
I ended up going back in the month of June for the second interview to finish up. I don't really remember. They asked more questions. It was just, I guess, for them to have something on the record. what I have found is when someone says this is off the record, those are the things that need to be on the record.
Oh, for sure.
I've learned through political and law enforcement experiences that I've had, just be very transparent and truthful.
Right.
And not try to manipulate and navigate a story to fit what they want.
To fit a narrative.
Exactly.
So at some point, Matt Derbies was no longer the prosecutor on the case. When was that? Was that before the first trial? Right? It was somewhere, I would imagine, in that.
It was, I believe, April of 2021.
Okay.
When he was removed.
So the whole year goes by, and you only had those 2 interviews, right? You had a May interview, a June interview. Mm-hmm. What about June all the way until April when they changed out prosecutors and?
After the second interview in June, I was still doing supervised visitation with my boys. We would have something usually once a week, if not every other week. I was having to make quite a drive to come to the area just to see them. I would visit with them and leave the area because it still wasn't safe. The media was still out there. There were still publications being put out there that were very negative and slanderous towards me in the case involving me.
Still about the children?
Still about the children, which had nothing to do with it.
And at no point through all of this, the Attorney General's office never went on the record or to the public and said, hey, I just want you guys to know, her case was actually 5 years before that and has nothing to do with the children. We need to correct the record. We need to clear this up. We need WAFB and all the news channels that are putting out what's given to them. They never went and cleared any of that up.
Never happened. For 6 years, it would be Denny and Cynthia's picture and my picture, as though I was included with the things they did.
6 years. Holy smokes. Okay. So a lot of things are put out in the media. You only see your kids when you can or when you're allowed. You have meetings with your attorneys, meeting with your family.
The time between June and the original trial was scheduled for May of 2021. I was getting information, still trying to figure out any other evidence. I mean, that was the only evidence that we had. I had nothing else to go off of. It's kind of hard when you think, how do you defend yourself when this is all you have?
Right.
And I was working on visiting with the boys. That was my focus, trying to rebuild and, the visitation. The Attorney General's office asked Jason, my ex-husband, the boy's father, to come in and do an interview. He did an interview with them in June. I, at that point, filed a motion to try and get custody back of the boys, where we had split custody previously. It was week on, week off. There was no reason why we shouldn't. And those court proceedings led to having to fill out some documents. We had to do psych evaluations. We had to do drug screenings. And it really stirred up some things, unfortunately, with their father. He had a really hard time with that. And he had a substance abuse problem. He went to rehab. When he got out of rehab, he relapsed. There were discussions previously that he wanted, with the counselor, that he wanted to give custody back. He wanted to try to work things out to get the boys back to a normal schedule. And once he went to rehab and was released, he relapsed and he committed suicide with my boys present. The Attorney General's office has no idea the stress and pressure that it not only put on me, but my children, their father. He was trying to better himself, and it put too much on him. Then they had to experience that. So my 2 boys found their father in that state the same day that happened. I came straight to them with the law enforcement there. And I didn't know, the family had In the meantime, while I'm driving there to get the boys, the family filed an order taking custody away from me because they said I was going to take the boys from them. They were my children. They shouldn't have to go through anything else. Then the family court put an order against me giving custody to their grandfather. So we went through courts, and they allowed the boys to speak where they wanted to be. They told the court, we want to be with our mom. The judge ruled, we'll give you 50-50 custody, half to their aunt and uncle and half to you. So I was having to do split custody with relatives that did not live near us. They were in another parish. And I was ordered to live in the parish they went to school, still being slandered by the media, and I was labeled. I would not show myself in public. It was very hard to go to their sporting events. You know, parents look at you and snub you.
Right.
It was pretty embarrassing. It was hard for the boys. They don't want to be seen with their mom, you know,
Right.
because they've labeled her this way. And I couldn't protect our safe place, you know. It got, when bad went to worse, you think, how much more can we take from this?
Right.
So that's what happened between June and when trial started. January of 2021, I ended up getting full custody back of the boys. And lo and behold, we're getting ready to go to trial in May. And we were told there's been a cell phone discovered that has text messages between the person who invited me over and myself. And I thought, well, good. This is going to be great news.
Should be revealing, right?
Right. And my attorney said, do you remember any of these messages? I'm like, no. We would talk about exercising, workouts, recipes, essential oils,
Right.
kids and sports. That was it. Nothing more than that.
And so the trial was delayed because they had to go through finding out these text messages, discovery, right? So the Attorney General's office, but also your attorney should have been able to go through the text messages as well. So they go through those messages. I personally, and this is my personal opinion, feel like that cell phone appeared during spring cleaning
The day before trial.
because I feel like that was, I've always referred to her as the victim, so I'm going to continue to do so. The Attorney General's office's victim, I feel that phone was already there to begin with. It was discovered the day before because that was her way of trying to get out of something she had already said multiple times to the Attorney General's office in their interviews, especially came out in the retrial, that she wanted no part of this case. She never wanted anything to do with it from the very beginning. So I feel like that was her way of saying, hey, here's this phone. This ought to clear this up. I don't want anything to do with this. It's got to stop. But it didn't stop, did it?
It did not stop.
All it did was delay the trial even further.
And they still pushed forward. It was rescheduled for November of 2021, the Monday after Thanksgiving.
So now you have to wait another 6 months, 7 months to go to trial for something you still have no recollection of, no information of, other than knowing there's a video, there's now text messages, I've given you my emergency room records. What the hell is going on?
In the meantime, I have this huge ankle monitor on my ankle. We all know summers in Louisiana are very hot.
Mm-hmm.
My oldest was in baseball, and he did travel ball in the summer. And I was unable to accommodate him as his mom, his only surviving parent, to take him to play his baseball games in Alabama, Mississippi, anywhere. I couldn't drive him. They wouldn't let me. I had filed several motions. I went to one baseball tournament out of the area, and after that, the others were denied.
Wow.
The prosecutors would object and make sure that those motions were denied.
And the prosecutor's office, you're remaining the Attorney General's office.
Correct.
So they have literally stripped your freedom of speech. They have stripped your ability to freely move. You were essentially guilty for having to prove yourself innocent 6 years later. But you were guilty by association through the public. You were guilty through the wrongful media posts in regards to being involved as a third person with Denny and Cynthia Perkins. So everybody still thinks you're involved with the children. None of that was the case. You couldn't go anywhere in public. Death threats. Your ex-husband commits suicide. The boys now lose their father on top of not being able to have their mother. It just keeps getting worse. And they made sure your life, they stripped you of everything you could possibly do for yourself. So now it gets up into the trial, right? So November of 2021.
Yes. It was the hardest Thanksgiving to live through because my family came together. My thoughts are, is this the last time I'm going to see my boys? What is going to happen? How do I plan the future? You can't plan a future because you do not know what your future holds. It was very calm and surreal, very heavy, but you wanted to enjoy all those moments in case you never got them back.
Right.
You can never get the time back that you miss. And the Monday, it might have been November 27th. It was the Monday after Thanksgiving in 2021. Mm-hmm. The trial lasted for 1 week. It ended on December 3rd. It was a Friday. That was when the verdict came in. The whole week of trial was horrible.
Well, let's talk about that. Because at this point was the first time you really been able to truly see what this case was all about. They showed the video. You got to see the video. Did you have any recollection of any of that whole night?
None.
So you were literally seeing it for the very first time.
Parts of it. It's hard in the courtroom. They clear the courtroom out. Mm-hmm. No one wants to witness something that they were unaware of, and then you're being charged for doing something you didn't even know happened. The things that Barry and Erica would say, getting up there speaking to the jurors about me, were absolutely wrong. They didn't know me as a human, and I had never been in the court system. I had never experienced anything pertaining to courtrooms or cases or law. I just lived a normal life.
Right.
And to think I was coached, don't make this face, don't make that face. Make sure that you don't look here, don't look there. How do you do that when someone, a stranger, is walking around talking to 12 jurors, explaining who Melanie Curtin is, and they don't even know me? They can tell lies, and they can speak about a narrative that they want to tell a story about that is 100% wrong. And there is nothing that I could do but sit there and listen. It's very hard. I wanted to get on the stand. I wanted to testify. But I also knew the risk of the prosecutors, the Attorney General's office. They can twist and manipulate anything. And it's scary to think, I just want to get the truth out. I just want to share what's really happened here.
Right.
And it was so unfair. I felt there were many breaks of sobbing on the bathroom floor with my family. And it was like experiencing my own death. They were killing my heart and soul, telling lies, and there was nothing I could do. And to know that there are people that aren't getting told the truth. How can these jurors make a decision? Every time we tried to include evidence, everything was denied. I was stripped away from being able to give proof of this not being what they were making it to be.
And what they were objecting to was basically the rape shield law. was a lot of those objections. And for those listening, I do believe in the rape shield law. I think a lot of us believe in that rape shield law to protect someone from having to continue to disclose sexual experiences that they've had that have been, that would bring harm or something like that to the victim, right? But the rape shield law is not supposed to be used to prevent somebody from being able to have a defense. But in your first trial, that's what happened, because everything your attorney was objecting to was overruled and denied. So you literally just you really had no defense. You were just exposed. And you have the Attorney General's office speaking about you, saying things about you, which, as you're telling me, was completely false and completely not true. It was just for their narrative. So they basically steered this investigation. They steered it in the direction of the jurors to understand what their side of it was and how they wanted to be, and anything you had to go against what that narrative was not allowed in.
Correct. I had no ability. Everything was denied to defend myself.
Did you feel at any time, like when you went through the trial before they read the verdict, what was your gut telling you? Did you think that you would be found innocent, or did you think it was going to be found guilty because you didn't really know?
Well, sitting on the floor in the hallway waiting for deliberation, there's a Bible story about the disciples in the boat. And there were 12 disciples in the boat, and Jesus called and said, "Come, walk on the water to him." I said it only took one brave person, and I kept telling my sister, it only takes one. It just takes one. That's all we need is one. Mm-hmm. One brave person to step out. And so we kept holding up the finger, just one. And I didn't feel, I had hope, but I didn't feel confident that we were able to get enough information across for the jurors to make an accurate decision. I felt very defeated.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand what would happen with a guilty verdict at that point. I did not know what life meant after that.
Right.
I didn't think that far. I was living in that moment of hopes to be able to go home and start a new life.
Right. Put this behind you, put the pieces back together. And it's crazy because you talk about those 12 disciples, right? Only needing one. You didn't know it, but there was one. It just didn't work out in his favor for what he tried to do. And we'll explain that in a minute. Yeah. So the jury comes up with their verdict. You go back into the courtroom. Tell me what you were feeling and going through. And
it was so hard. I felt like, people say they have out-of-body experiences. Mm-hmm. Pretty sure that's what happened. I hit the floor. I heard my family, loud screams and cries. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what possibilities there were after that. We hadn't even discussed it or covered that. My attorney asked for a pill bond, I think, and he said nope. She's had plenty of time to get her things in order, and she's basically going to jail. This was it. We'll schedule sentencing. He was very harsh, and the judge said, "You are a grown adult, and you knew what you were doing when you did it. So we're going to have basically that was it. We're going to have no timeout. You should have known what you were doing. You should have known better."
And handcuffs.
Handcuffs and shackles.
Handcuffs and shackles, and off you go.
I don't really remember, probably 4 or 5 days after that. I was in I kept trying to sleep thinking I'm going to wake up and I'll be somewhere home or with one of my family members.
And that aggravated rape charge that you were then convicted of carried a life sentence without the chance of parole. So the rest of your natural life would have been spent behind bars. And they haul you off, and that's it. Like, you're off to prison to go start serving a life sentence for a crime you didn't commit. And to hear this from you all the way through those steps and everything that you had to endure, it didn't just stop there. It continued, right? Some of the things that I know that you didn't, I don't know. Maybe your attorney, John McClendon, told you about it right after. But for those listening, when the verdict was read and Melanie was hauled off to prison, there was a juror. It was juror number 3, I believe. And so he ended up immediately, and I'm not talking the next day, I'm not talking on the following week. It was right there in the courthouse. People are still trying to figure out what the hell just happened. This juror reached out to John McClendon, which was Melanie's attorney, and said, there's a problem here. We actually wrote a note to the judge and underlined it twice, stating, we cannot, and underlined the word cannot. Underlined it twice. Gave that to the judge, and the judge says, well, you got to go back in and figure it out. Which, I mean, look, that's within the judge's abilities to be able to do that, to make sure that it's not a hung jury. But technically speaking, that was a hung jury at that moment. The juror then starts talking about the threats that were going on. Like, hold on. I was threatened by the other juror members. I was bullied by the other juror members. There was another juror that punched a wall so hard that the bailiff had to come in to see if everybody was okay. You didn't know that this was going on at that particular time, but that's what was reported to John McClendon. So John McClendon then immediately goes and, hey, we had a hung jury. We got this juror member that's speaking out. Like, what the hell happened here? Goes and brings it to the judge's attention. They have a meeting on Monday. The Monday morning, they clear out the courtroom. You have the Attorney General's office. You have John McClendon, and they're talking about this with the juror. The juror was actually present and at the courthouse that day. There was some sort of meeting for 20 minutes that nobody was present to other than the attorneys. And next thing you know, it's, well, too bad, so sad. We're done with this case. We're moving on. So it just feel like the injustice just keeps happening. Now, I'm not saying, I don't know. I wasn't privileged to that conversation. I don't know what was said by the judge then. I don't know what the rulings are with that. So I'm not trying to, I don't know. The only people that can speak to that is the judge and the attorneys that were present.
There was also a motion filed requesting that the judge could he could take part, or he could have been included as a 13th juror, where it could have also been a hung jury, because the judge had reviewed all of the evidence. He reviewed all the evidence and denied that evidence coming in. So he had a clear scope of what we were trying to use in my defense, and he denied it and scheduled my sentencing for March of 2022.
So he just wanted to move on from it. He was done with it. We're moving on. We got other things. Lock her up.
The key.
And then, you're sentenced to life. I mean, that's the charge, right? First degree aggravated rape. It's life without the chance of parole. So your sentencing is kind of pointless at that point, because it's life sentence without the chance of parole. I'm not going to come back into a courtroom to hear what you already know you're going to say. So, that happens in March, and then your sentence starts. You start serving, you were actually serving that time since December. So you are already 90 days, 120 days in. And it was around that time, shortly thereafter, that your sister contacted me. And I still remember getting the call from her. And as tough as I've gotten to know your sister pretty well, and as tough as she is, and I honestly mean this when I say this, but I don't think you could have had a bigger guardian angel than your sister. I had spent hundreds upon hundreds of hours on the phone with your sister, and to hear her fight and her unwillingness to accept it, because she knew this was a crock of shit. And she asked me to help. And she, I had worked not only in Livingston Parish before, but I had been a detective there, had worked in the Secret Service. I had known a lot of investigative stuff. She wanted to know, what can you do? Can you figure out where the gaps were in this? And we started conversing on it, and I was more than willing to help. But I was utterly shocked when I started going through and seeing the countless amount of times where things were objected to that were not allowed to get in. This isn't coming in. That isn't coming in. It was literally shocking to me. And, it took a long time to go through all those documents, but I remember I got to speak to John, the juror number 3. He was very detailed in the video because nobody was allowed to see the video. The only people that saw the video that was in the courtroom that day when they showed it in your trial, obviously the investigators, your attorneys, but I had never seen it. Nobody was allowed to see it. But the way that the juror described the video was very telling. It was very telling to me because he paid attention to not only breathing, he paid attention to hand movements, who had nail polish on, who did not have nail polish on. He was very descriptive about what movements took place during the video, who was making those movements during the video, and he saw it for what it was. This was a role play. This was a role play. This is not some sort of deviant behavior of something very malicious and vicious as like you were charged and treated like. This was strictly a role play, and nobody wanted to listen. And he let it be known that there actually was a second juror that thought the same thing, but also had been bullied to the point where, okay, I'll just go with the guilty verdict. Like, I'm going to leave this alone. That juror, number 3, was a Marine. I know a lot of Marines, and they are not babies. They are not wusses. They are hardcore. I don't care what your job is. If you served in the Marine Corps, you're a hardcore individual. Okay. That is just their mentality. And he served in Iraq. So for this juror to have gotten to the point where the threats were so bad that he threw up because of the threats of violence, like that to me says a lot of what the hell was going on in that jury room. And it also shows to me, I didn't think there was a whole lot of control going on with what was happening with the jury room. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it without knowing what went on behind the scenes, but obviously taking it from his words, right? It was mind-blowing. So I start working on things. I didn't have contact with you because you were locked away. So everything that I did was through your sister. And one of the things I did is I was going and pulling documents online. There were a lot of the attorney generals, and I'm saying it that way because my podcast was apparently erroneous and full of lies. I was pulling your documents that you put out all over the internet back when you charged Dennis Perkins. It had everything from timelines. Sometimes it had names and sometimes it didn't, but you could get the scope of a history over the years of what the charges were for Denny and Cynthia and who was involved during that time. That was your documents. Just saying. So I pulled all those things, was starting to find out the problems, and I started going on social media and I started putting it out like, hold on, everybody, hold on. Melanie Curtin didn't do this shit. She did not do this. Like, this is the narrative that was pitched couldn't have been any more inaccurate of what the facts were. And it was becoming very obvious. And I think if the Attorney General's office didn't have blinders on or a specific narrative or objective they were going to, they would have seen it. And if they did see it and they continue to prosecute anyway, it's a bigger issue. And it's a bigger red flag, right? So I'll get back to my piece of it. But when you were sitting there in prison, and your life's completely taken from you now. First of all, tell us all, what the hell was that life like for you behind bars?
It was life-changing, shocking. I couldn't believe that there were prosecutors that felt that I deserved to live in prison in that environment for the rest of my life. I can only say that I survived through that by the grace of God. It was His strength. There were women that I did meet in there. They would ask to do Bible studies. When I first got in there, though, I slept. I kept thinking it's so loud. There's lights on all the time. Mm-hmm. This is everything that I experienced in there is everything that my mother raised me not to say, not to do, not to take part in. And I'm not saying that they're bad people. It's the environment that happens when you're locked up. It's so mentally challenging that it's so wrong on so many levels. And I can say that I was incarcerated for 23 months during this whole process.
It's a long time.
Every day. There's times you don't know what day it is, what time it is. You definitely get lost in the walls. You're limited to any outside time. Sunshine. After my sentencing, I remembered thinking, I'll never get to walk outside, go hiking. I'll never get to be in nature. The thought of I can never touch pine straw, leaves, my thought process, and realizing they have literally taken everything away from me. I could never work with those charges. I could never be put on work release. I could never make money to try to send to my family to repay them for all that they had done for me to fight for this. They had stripped away my livelihood, my existence. And I could understand how somebody may think, why should I even live at this point?
Right.
At the time, how old was I? I guess I was 42, maybe, by then. My boys were at that point 15 and 17. I still had time to spend with them. I would never see them finish school. I couldn't. It was just really hard to think, how could they think and sleep at night knowing that they have done this? Do they truly think that I deserved that type of sentencing when they did not even know me? Right. They had never spoke to me in a casual conversation. They didn't know my upbringing. Mm-hmm. They didn't know my characteristics, or they didn't speak to my children. They didn't speak to Chris. That's who they would have really gotten to know who I was.
Right.
They didn't speak to my close friends or my family. At sentencing, the judge got to hear each one of my family members and Chris give their letters. And I was actually told at sentencing, do not bring your children. Do not let your boys come to sentencing. Because it's the judge, it's too hard on the judge. They prefer children not be there. Well, you're taking me away from my children, so why should they not be allowed there?
Yeah.
I don't care who it makes feel bad.
Yeah.
That was my life. That was what I was facing.
Yeah, could care less what anybody else thinks. Like,
you're taking their mother away from them.
Mm-hmm.
And the comment that was made in court justified that he was okay with that decision.
Wow. I'd like to know how they all sleep at night as well, especially now, right?
Yeah.
So you're locked away 23 months. You know that there was an attorney working on your behalf, Julie Tizard, and she was working very hard on putting together an appeal for you.
Yes.
Which was a treasure trove of information for the First Circuit Court of Appeals, because it outlined in detail all the exculpatory evidence. And what I mean by exculpatory evidence, there was an affidavit from another state that proved that the victim, stating that they would never engaged in this kind of activity whatsoever was not their first time in that kind of activity. In fact, they have engaged in that kind of activity several years prior and used that as a sworn affidavit as part of the divorce for being involved in that kind of activity, that kind of sexual activity. It was in writing. So clearly that was new evidence. In addition to that, the exculpatory evidence that Denny's internet search history, photos, videos, there were tons and tons of information that would have painted the picture for what was really going on, but that was overruled. But Julie Tizard wrote a masterpiece of an appeal on your behalf, which outlined all the things that were being read that were literally public. Your trial transcripts, documents, just everything and anything. And I remember going on and talking about the expert witness that came on that was basing your level of intoxication through a video or a photo with no background behind it. Like, you could take two people that weigh the exact same height, but one might have a higher tolerance than the other. So how the hell can you actually determine that? I'm not saying she doesn't know what she's doing, but in your case, it was bullshit. And she was paid a lot of money to testify into that. All these things are being put out there. And I remember the day that the appeal came back, which was in October. I think it was October 13th, somewhere in through there.
On 10/5.
Okay, October 5th.
23.
Damn, I'm not good at this. So October 5th of 23. I remember exactly where I was. I was in Jupiter, Florida. I was at my son's baseball tournament. He was playing in the WWBA that they put on every October. So baseball people know what I'm talking about. It was in between his games. And all of a sudden, I just get literally texts like you won't believe. 50, 60 texts within 2-3 minutes. Various people. Melanie Curtin, she's getting out. She's getting out. The appeal. Holy crap. And then I was like, whoa. So I started reading that. And I remember feeling so much pride and how happy I was for you because the truth was finally getting out there. Walk me through that day when you found out.
I was really the last one of my family. I was limited with communication.
Right.
And I actually found out my boys found out before me because it was all over social media.
It was everywhere.
On a scheduled call with my sisters, my mom, and they said, guess what? The ruling came down. They overturned it. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? I still didn't know.
Should open those doors right then and there. Run.
And I
run
said,
out.
Okay, then when are they going to let me out? When can I get out? And they said, well, we have to go to a hearing. And when you get out, you may be on bond. And I said, why? I still don't understand the legal system. So I felt I
don't think anybody understands the legal system when it came to your case.
Yes. And my attorney said, okay, well, we have to call and schedule a bond hearing for you to get out and see what happens from here. They may drop the case. This may be it.
Right.
And they scheduled the bond hearing on 10/10 of 23. And the judge had the discretion to change the bond amount. He could have made any changes at that point, from what I was told. He said he wanted to honor the previous judge's bond conditions that had been 3 years prior, and kept the bond at $350,000.
Real nice.
Which was very expensive for the second time. But I wanted to be free. I wanted to get out. So we worked that out, and I bonded out.
Oh, my gosh. And I would imagine as soon as you got to get your hands on your boys.
Yes.
That must have been a hug of a lifetime.
They met me within minutes of leaving. We had to go to a quiet place. it just didn't feel real. And it was still a little scary because when you're in a prison environment and when you've been picked up and arrested, you just feel like there's always someone watching you. There's always, they'll come get you at any point. It definitely causes some mental scrutiny and anguish.
Oh, yeah.
And you feel like you're always being videoed or recorded, or I'd lived under cameras and being monitored. I had an ankle monitor on the second time. That was still my bond conditions. But it was great to see them.
Oh, I can only
imagine. It was
imagine.
still a little scary, like, okay, now what does this mean? Now what do we do?
Have some real food, be around family, take a real shower.
Yes.
Just kind of have some normalcy. I would imagine it took you a little while to get back to that, to feel like you're in a routine outside of
it
being
felt
locked
like
up.
I've come full circle because a month later, we were having Thanksgiving. And it was like, wow. A few years ago, we were having this and it was very heavy.
Right.
Now we're having Thanksgiving and it's great. We don't know what the future holds, but I stayed hopeful the entire time.
Well, that's when the tide started to turn,
yes.
Right? That's when everything started to change. And again, you're on another $350,000 bond. Still have to be monitored with an ankle monitor. Still restricted, still confined. I remember going to the hearing that you had where you were allowed to leave the state, but only with continuous monitoring and checking in appointments and things such as that. So for anyone that wants to read the First Circuit Court of Appeals, you can go to the First Circuit Court of Appeals and download the PDF of what the ruling was that came back from the First Circuit Court of Appeals. Because that's what I did, this erroneous podcast, right? It's laughable. So I went to that, I read it. And for those that want to understand what was in that, when we talked earlier about using the rape shield law too much, that's really where the infractions came in. It was abuse of discretion. I don't want to hurt any feelings here. Abuse of discretion, 7 times. That happened 7 times where exculpatory evidence would have been presented and it was blocked. And the First Circuit Court of Appeals, so the judge's peers said, that can't happen. This shows prejudice towards the defendant being you. 7 times. There were also other infractions within it, but the recommendation was either drop the charges or retry the case.
And allow all of that evidence
And allow all of the evidence in this time, because that would clearly show a completely different picture. The Attorney General's office, what did they do, Melanie? They went to the Louisiana Supreme Court.
They filed a writ, yes.
They filed a writ to the Louisiana Supreme Court. So now you have the First Circuit Court of Appeals. That got you out.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have their findings. 7 times there's a hand slap for things that showed prejudice towards you.
And in that bond hearing on 10/10, the judge was extremely angry and said that evidence didn't even appear. It was not in any of his records.
What do you mean?
That's what he said in the hearing. He said, I've reviewed this in my chambers, and the evidence that they refer to in this appellate ruling, I don't even have any of this. But all of that evidence was in the court transcripts, and that's where the appeal brief was written by my attorney, Julie Tizard.
Yep.
He was not happy about that.
Oh, well.
Yes.
So it goes to the Louisiana Supreme Court. 7 judges. They take their time. It took a little while before that came back from the Louisiana Supreme Court. It wasn't a quick turnaround. But
April of 2024.
April of 2024. And it was unanimous. It was unanimous.
7-0.
So now you have 7 more judges of this judge's peers with a heck of a lot more experience coming together to say, no, We agree with the First Circuit Court of Appeals. We agree with it fully that these infractions absolutely did happen. This outcome could have been completely different. You either retry the case or drop the charges. So the Attorney General's office now loses for the second time. Now all that evidence has to come in. So then they tell you they're going to retry the case. Tell me more.
It was kind of highs and lows. You think, okay, great, we've made progress. And then no, they want to retry this. My thoughts were, the person that this involves, does she really want to pursue this? If she doesn't know that this happened, if I don't know that this happened, why are we still pursuing this? Why is this still happening? She had said she didn't want to go through with this. She did not want to pursue this. Why are they coming after me so badly?
And stated that from the beginning.
The very beginning, in her first interviews. This is 4 years in. Still can't understand, why are they coming after me? I know there was questions or gossip about maybe I know something. Why are they coming after me? I soon learned that it was a political prosecution. This happened when Jeff Landry was running for governor and Liz was running for attorney general. This was tied to a high-profile case. So the only conclusion that I personally could make was they just don't want to look bad publicly. But I don't have that perspective because I'm not in those realms of politics.
Right.
I could only think, well, maybe they'll do the right thing. I had hope. Maybe they'll see this. If she doesn't want to go through with this, and the rulings have been what they are, it would be easy. Why don't they drop this and say, it's not worth pursuing? Did they want to interview me? Did they want to speak with my attorneys? Did they want to ask, can we come up with a deal? Can we work something out? And all along, I had a hard time personally thinking, why should I take a deal when I shouldn't even be in this position? And I couldn't understand, what do they want with little old me? I don't harm people. I'm not a danger to society. I'm not a threat to anyone. But why do they keep trying to pursue this? What is in it to pursue this? How do they think they can justify and sleep at night putting me behind bars for the rest of my life? They've already ruined, I've just had a hard time. How do you get back on your feet again?
Oh my gosh, you lost everything. Houses, money, kids, ex-husband, family, your public appearance, like absolutely everything in your life was gone. You literally had nothing.
I walked out in October with a box of my personal belongings. That's it. That's it. The charges were still pending, so when they overturned, I still had pending charges. I couldn't go get a job. If they do a background check, I have these pending felony charges. Who wants to hire me?
Right.
I would even go try and do small jobs here and there. But I didn't even want to give people my name. I would go and avoid trying to say my last name. Because if anybody Googled my name, it was ruined. And they would judge me. And how do you start life over again? It was living in limbo every day.
And I don't think people really understand the severity of what you're talking about and trying to live that way. Like when you have been smeared publicly and perp walked and told you're involved with children. I mean, look, let's be real. We can make a post right now on social media. And somewhere, I'll give it 1 hour that someone's going to write on there, well, you shouldn't be free because you were involved with children. 6 years you had to live under that. 6 years you had absolutely nothing to freaking do with the kids. Nothing. And yet that's still what everybody believes, which was set forth by the Attorney General's office purposefully, because that's what they gave to the media and that's what the media put out. Media can't get that information from anybody else. It has to come from a source, right? So, like, honestly, that has to be so hard because you really can't do anything. You are completely strapped. You can't work. You can't go anywhere publicly. You can't go to the grocery store. You can't do anything because there is a constant threat around you 24/7.
At all times.
The level of paranoia that must create.
Yes. It's, it feels like there's always somebody watching you. I mean, there was someone already following me. I had an ankle monitor on, so I was tracked 24/7. I had to report addresses of where I would stay to make sure that it was on record because they still considered me a flight risk. And because of the severity of the charges, it was required.
And they took your passport. They took everything.
Yes. So I didn't really have any means to pay for things I stayed with family and I slowly had to, luckily I had friends and family that helped get the simple necessities, clothes, your toiletries, the basic stuff. I had to rely on others. I was a grown adult who had like a very good job and career in life and it was gone.
And ruined.
Ruined. And what I found out is with the charges that they had pending over me, even if I didn't have family or support, and if I had gotten out on this bond, I could have never gone to a halfway house or lived in housing because of those charges. They don't allow people with those charges.
So you'd have been homeless, living on the street.
Homeless.
If you didn't have family taking care of you or friends.
Yes.
That's really eye-opening for a lot of people because I don't think a lot of people think that in depth of what your experiences were like or what you had to go through during all of this. And it's sad and it's shocking. It's upsetting. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to go through all that. I really am. I know that once they decide, because I want to say anything that if there were plea agreements, did they even make any offers of any plea agreements of any sort during the time that before your retrial?
There was nothing officially offered except for right before the second trial. There were words spoken that said, well, we'll take a deal if it's jail time, unspecified jail time, and plead guilty. Do you think that would be something that sounds reasonable? Was there sex offender registering
as well?
Definitely. That was a no deal. So register, jail time, unspecified amount of jail time with a guilty verdict.
So it wasn't a plea deal at all?
That was not. That was
just them being
like
cocky.
A joke. That's like spitting in my face.
Yeah. So at this point, I want to set the stage for everybody. So this before your retrial just came up in March. This has gone on for 6 years.
6 long years.
And they still chose not to interview you again or to talk to you. They were just like, look, we got this in the bag. We're going to go in. We're going to show this video and we're going to keep the blinders on and do a half-assed job and think that they're going to be able to prosecute you at this point. And they're also being cocky towards you about like, oh yeah, so yeah, we'll give you a plea deal. Sure, it's going to be unspecified jail time, register as a sex offender, and yeah, plead guilty. Mm-hmm. Not really an offer.
No.
So, okay. So it goes to trial. So your trial started March 9th of this year. They were very meticulous going through a lot of jurors to get 12 jurors that didn't know of your case, didn't know your history, that was vetted out, verified. Therefore, they moved forward with your case.
On the third day.
It took
2 full days for jury selection.
Okay, so it took 2 full days for jury selection. They get a jury of 12. They start the case. They show the video. They basically use the same type of information you used in your first trial. Were they presenting anything new, or was it all just the same song and dance?
They didn't have really anything new.
So it was the same song and dance.
Same
Smear
song and
Melanie,
dance.
smear Melanie, smear Melanie. Everything about you is bad, right? That's how they portrayed it. So what went different this time in your trial?
I had, hands down, a phenomenal team
Yes, you did.
to fight for me. They were a godsend. They knew the law. They're females. They understand. They used the evidence the way that it should have been allowed the first time.
In all fairness, the judge has 5 more years of experience at this point, so I think he was a little bit on his game more than on the first time. I'll say that. I think he was.
Yes. I can say that it helped to have a different set of jurors. But the evidence that was allowed and the testimony that was revealed is what made things clear for jurors to understand what really was happening and how things should have been presented.
And so what you're referring to was when your defense team called the witness to come testify. What did that witness testify to?
She made it known that she did not want to have anything to do with this, that she let them know several times she didn't want to go through with this.
You're talking about the victim?
Yes.
Okay. So the victim had stated it multiple, and this is the Attorney General's star witness, by the way, made it clear from the get-go, which was very evident in the interviews, starting back in late 2019, early 2020, that she wanted nothing to do with this. She was asked questions. My understanding took her a minute or two to be able to even answer some of the questions. She clearly didn't want to be there. She clearly wanted nothing to do with any of this.
Very silent, long delayed responses.
And this was, in my opinion, some of the problem, right? Because it was the Attorney General's office that turned this into the spectacle it became. Because they knew on the front end that their victim, they forced this person to be a victim because they didn't willingly want to have anything to do with this, but they forced it. It turned it into this nightmare that it became for years. And here it is in the second trial, and this victim still wants nothing to do with this case and looking down and not really answering the questions, just being very short, but a lot of, I don't remember, I don't recall, I don't remember, I don't recall, right? That was kind of on repeat. They watched the video. The jurors saw the video. I'm sure this time your defense team kind of let it be known to look for various movements and things like that, something that probably wasn't said the first time. Mm-hmm. But then your defense team called up a witness.
They did. I had never met this person. Didn't have any. It was kind of a surprise for me. I was told she reached out. She said she wanted to come testify because it's not right for them to put me away. I shouldn't have to fight for this when it's not the first time and the only time that this has happened. And she had an experience and she wanted to share and do what she could to help me. And I wanted to meet her and thank her, but I wasn't able to. I was just grateful that God really did bring somebody, laid it on someone's heart to come and try to help.
And put themselves out there.
Yeah, that was a very brave thing. Extremely. I wasn't given that choice. I was drugged through it all. And she had sympathy. She understood that wasn't right, so she wanted to help.
And what this witness testified to was that she also had experiences with Dennis Perkins. She was told to take, I don't know, was her sleeping medication or prescribed medication, whatever it was, make her super sleepy, would be instructed by Dennis Perkins to take this medication, drive over to his house, get into his bed, and when she fell asleep, to continue to be asleep. He would come in at his leisure, and if you woke up anytime during this, you continue to play asleep while I believe she said her face was covered, right? All this sounds familiar because there was plenty of that in the files. She had to keep her face covered and let him finish. And this went on for a little while. There was also other females within the files that role played the same way, had done all the same things. It was a fetish. It was a fantasy. I find it hard to believe that the Attorney General's office, as smart as those attorneys are, wouldn't be able to figure that out. I don't understand. I can't speak for them, but I don't understand. And so that witness gives that testimony, which was pretty damn revealing for the jurors. The jurors now hear everything within the case, including the closing arguments. They go back. They deliberate. It didn't even take them 2 hours. You get called back into the courtroom. Walk me through what you had to have been feeling and experiencing, knowing, okay, there's a verdict. They're calling me back into the room. I can't imagine you not having deja vu, but I really want to hear what was going through your mind.
It was reliving a nightmare all over again with hopes that there's a victory and that there was light on the other side of this. It was a little nerve-wracking that within the first maybe 10, 15 minutes, they called us back in saying they had a question. That was very quick. And my first gut was, I don't know if this is good or bad. They called us in a second time, maybe within an hour, I believe. Another question. Everything was okay. But yes, within 2 hours, they said we have a verdict. And I think it happened so fast, I didn't have time to be nervous other than I'd
have been in the bathroom throwing up. I'm not going to lie.
I was numb, I think, at that point. Like, I've already lived through this. I have been in this exact same courtroom, in this exact same seat. 6 years previous.
This was the same courtroom?
Yes.
Same judge, same courtroom, same parish, same prosecutors. Woo.
And I kept thinking, there's 12 in the boat. There's got to be at least one. But I could tell during this trial, things were different. I felt, as hard as it was, to still hear them speak so negatively and speak lies about me that weren't true. I felt like I had some defense. I did have great defense. But the concern was, are these jurors really hearing and understanding this? There's a lot of information. This trial was a lot of stop and go, stop and go. We were dismissed for days at a time. It went over the weekend, and we had gag orders put on us. No one could speak of anything. And trying to protect, the information. But I kept thinking, are these jurors tuning out? Are they listening to this? What are they grasping? It's one thing when I know the truth, but are they really hearing and seeing this for what it is?
Right.
And that's what I was most concerned about. And when I got in and I thought, my attorneys have done a phenomenal job. They were like lions, but looked like sheep. And they both held my hand, each one on each side. And I thought, last time I left this courtroom, they were dragging me out off the floor because I fell apart. And even leading up to trial, I kept telling my family, I don't know if I'm coming home. I kept telling Chris and my son, I don't know if I'm coming back. It's almost like planning for your funeral or a death. Little things. Do I need to buy more groceries? Am I coming back in a few days? Or am I going to be gone for good? Is someone going to have to pack up my belongings again? And what is going to happen? You don't know. And everything came down to that moment of the verdict, thinking, am I driving home or am I going away again? And how can I fight this? I kept thinking and telling my attorneys, I can't do this again. I can't do this again. And all I could remember is God said, have faith. I wouldn't bring you this far to take you back again. You've had a great defense. You've had great support. And when we're waiting, the judge pulled the papers out. He looks front and back on the first page and pauses. It's silent. We're just dying for, the verdict. He looks at the second sheet of paper for the second charge and flips it over, and he's quiet. And when he read the verdict, holding both of my attorney's hands, squeezing them, I hear shouts and crying and, excitement. And I honestly still did not know what all that meant. It didn't seem real. And I thought, this means I have my life back. And I looked at my attorney. I'm like, what now? She goes, you can go free. You're free.
Your nightmare is over.
You're leaving. Your
nightmare is over.
It was
a 6-year nightmare.
Shocking, but exciting. I think my body it was like, my best explanation is it felt like I've gone through a major medical procedure after the 8 days.
Yeah.
Of just constant scrutiny and trial. And I could hear everybody crying behind me, my family. And I wanted to look at the jurors. I just wanted to hug them and tell them, thank you for giving me my life and my freedom back. But it's really hard being in a courtroom, and you can't scream, you can't get excited. And I hope one day I get to thank the jurors for sitting through that grueling, it was 8 days of trial, but they had a weekend where they had to be under restriction in the gag order. So there's so much more to the story. There's so much more to share. But I am so thankful for the witness that came up at the last minute. She doesn't know how much that means.
Here. Yeah.
And the jurors. And the juror. There was that one on this one, too.
Right.
Haven't met or spoke to anyone yet, but I hope I get the privilege to do that one day. Because these jurors didn't know the previous trial.
Right.
The previous errors, that I had already been through incarceration. They didn't know the story leading up to it. And I'm so thankful. Words can't even express. It's hard to even find the right words to share how massively grateful I am. And it just still seems surreal. And I find myself now, I had a curfew. I had to report to someone constantly. I had to think twice. I couldn't travel. And I still feel like I'm coming out of that shell. It's like a teenager going to big life, moving out. It's going to take one day at a time.
Right.
Things change, and it's a thinking process. You think through things. You don't realize how suppressed and how much scrutiny you lived under for so long, and how it actually changed your day-to-day living and thinking processes.
I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your story. I will say I think you're an incredibly strong spiritual woman that stuck by the truth, because the one thing that never changes is the truth and the facts. And you believed in yourself, you believed in the truth, and you stuck to that, and you've never wavered. It took 6 years, but eventually the right team came around you to prove your innocence. You went through 6 years of something you should have never experienced from day one. You were a victim. You were not a defendant. The fact that there are still women within that files that they haven't even identified, but knew enough that you were a defendant, is mind-blowing to me. The witness that went on the stand, they never even contacted before. So when the Attorney General, Liz Morrell, or even the prosecutors say that they want to work harder for people that are involved with sexual assault, I believe that that's what they want to do, and I believe they'll do that. But you were a victim too. And I didn't see you getting that kind of treatment. I didn't see you getting hugs, have an attorney general flying in on a helicopter to console somebody. You're a victim. And I hope that they do better. And your story is super important. It's super important because there was an injustice. You were convicted and put away for life. And if it wasn't for your sister really igniting the flames to get people involved, including me, Julie Tizard, and then eventually your defense team, if it wasn't for that, you would still be sitting in prison for a crime you never, ever, ever committed. You should have never have been put through this. And I know, and I believe in my heart, there's a lot of people in this world, females specifically, but anyone that's in the criminal justice systems that didn't do the crimes or were wrongfully convicted. I feel like your message and your story is going to be incredibly powerful going forward. I think your purpose in life that you've probably been searching for the last several years, like what is going on? What am I going to do? I think you know what that purpose is. And I think you're going to change a lot of lives. And I think you're going to impact a lot of people positively through your experiences and what you've been through. And I hope that you do go on and do that. I find you to be an amazing woman, very strong. And I think you have a beautiful family. Your sister is by far your guardian angel, in my opinion. She literally spearheaded a lot of this. And I think your children are amazing. I'm so sorry you had to go through all this, but I am so grateful now that you get to see the positivity of what believing in what's right and what it can actually do. And you're free. You're free to do whatever the hell you want now. And, your story ended on a cruise ship 6 years ago. Well, I have a feeling you're going to be getting on a cruise ship soon because that's like one of your favorite things to do.
Yes, it is.
And so
we're bringing it full circle.
They took
me off a cruise ship and I'm getting right back on one. I get to start over again.
I love that for you. I do. I love that for you. I think your fiance is amazing. Obviously, the amount of love he has in his heart for you. You have a few minutes to say whatever you want to say to whatever is still that you just want to, if there's anything you want to say, by all means, the listeners are definitely going to be listening.
Oh, I think the hardest part through this most recent trial was when Liz came in the courtroom as an attorney general. I know she's a mother. She has sons. And throughout this, I kept thinking, and I would say, she's a mom. She's got to understand what it's like. And maybe I had hopes, and I was told, it's never going to happen. Don't get your hopes up, Melanie. And I thought, she's a mom, she's a wife. She should understand. Maybe we could have a conversation. Maybe there could be meetings. Why is this getting so out of hand? Surely they need to understand or find the truth in this. And what was so hard and hurtful is that it had to come down to going through the legal system and fighting for my freedom and then being told all these years, you don't have a voice. In the beginning, I was told, Melanie, this is going to be like you're being handcuffed and pinned in a corner and punched in the gut over and over again because you can't speak about this publicly. Mm-hmm. And I think that's wrong. I think when someone needs to get the truth out, they need to be able to have the freedom to do that and not be ridiculed, not be chastised and beaten down. It shouldn't have gotten to where it did 6 years later. But I am so thankful for all the attorneys, for my family, for you having a voice and having an outlet when I didn't even know and I wasn't able to communicate. And my family has been my strength. Chris could have left. I think any person in a normal situation would have walked away and thought, I am not getting involved in this.
Right.
8 years later, he's still right here with me.
It's a beautiful thing. It's love.
It is. My sisters, Jenny's my younger sister, but her personality is not my little sister. She's younger, but she's not little. Mm-hmm. Even growing up, she's always been the one that stood up for me. And I have 4 sisters. Each one of them have played a very important, crucial role in helping me in their own way. And there will be a book.
Oh, yeah, sure.
There will be a book. There will be a series that everybody can binge watch one day to lead up to what's happened throughout this entire 6-year process. And I just hope that there will be restoration, that I can get my life back. I've had plenty of time to write and make notes and come up with things that I can do to try to help. There were so many women that were wrongfully incarcerated that I was with during that time. They just need help. They need support. And some people are put in there, and once you get in, you can't get out. It is so hard to get out of the system and to fight. And if you don't have somebody on the outside to fight for you, it's almost near impossible.
Right.
Even when I got out, it was hard to fight. But I'm thankful for every single person that has been involved throughout this entire process. I don't know what I would do. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for everyone that stood up for me and did it out of the goodness of their heart and did it out of knowing they want to right the wrongs. And I hope that I'm able to help others in the future.
I have no doubts that you will. I think you're going to help a lot of people in a lot of places, and probably places and in depths that you have no idea where it can go. But I think your story is powerful. You made it, right? You are that success story when so many others have not had that success. And I believe that you're going to take that and you're going to do some extreme good with it, and you're going to bring a lot of positivity and a lot of awareness, and you're going to change a lot of lives for the better. And I can't wait to read your book or to watch whatever series comes out, whatever your future entails. I look forward to that. And again, thank you. I thank your family, your sister for reaching out to me. I'm forever grateful for being able to help out on your case to the best that I could. Your legal team was outstanding, from appeals to defense.
Phenomenal.
But your family support was incredible, and family is everything. And you have a beautiful family. And so you need to go enjoy them and get your life back and go have some fun and, start working away at whatever those future endeavors are. But I think whatever it's going to be beautiful for you. And I can't wait to hear and see all about it.
We will definitely be in touch.
All right.
There's more to come.
There's more to come. Ladies and gentlemen, Melanie Curtin, live and in the studio today. Can't thank her enough for her time. We'll be back next week with another episode. There's more to come. The True Crime Report. I'm your host, Jim Rathmann. Thank you for listening.